For an Oregon apartment owner who is self-managing, what's the first sign that it's time to hand over the reins to a property manager?
If you start accidentally creating waivers, which I don't know if you know you're doing at the time, and you start to get pushback from that tenant and they start to essentially quote landlord-tenant law to you, you may want to either contact an attorney or contact a property management company.
So what made you both choose property management as a career? Did you fall into it or did you pick it by choice?
I fell into it. I applied for a receptionist position about 19 years ago and really fell in love with it and just have been doing it ever since.
I've been doing this since 2009, so 17 years. And I moved back home from California and applied for a maintenance coordinator position and just fell in love with it for some reason.
It's kind of neat. You guys have really been boots on the ground, so you understand what it takes to run a company. So tell us who you are and tell us about your company. How long have you been in property management and what type of properties do you manage? Lea, we'll start with you.
My name is Lea and our company is AG Property Management and AG Campus Housing. We manage about 65% student housing and the rest is everything else. We have about 270 properties, which makes up about 1,600 units.
I've been with AG since we opened in 2015 and Leah's stuck with me. Been here ever since.
What does a typical day look like for you, for your company, your team? So we'll start with you, Krystina, because you're more of the office manager, right?
Yeah. So I typically start my day from home, honestly. I work from home in the mornings for a couple hours, and then I come into the office, and most of it just starts with reviewing emails. Right now is our pre-lease season, so I'm 100% pre-lease. Everything's pre-lease right now so that we can get everything rented before students leave, which is typically in June. And then it's usually just day by day. Sometimes you have emergencies. I was dealing with people trapped in an elevator all night last night, so that's kind of how my day started today, but tomorrow it'll be something completely different.
I'm trying to get her to work on her work-life balance a little bit more because I see those emails at 4 a.m. in the morning and I'm, just work-life balance a little more. My day starts with a cup of coffee always, essentially just going through emails, any messages for me. I am very, very involved in the day-to-day with the office, even though Krystina she's the office manager, so she runs the day-to-day operations. I am very much by her side, and if there's any emergencies, flooding, fires, elevator issues, entrapment, things like that, we work hand in hand every day.
Wow, that's great. When a new owner comes to you, walk me through what the onboarding process looks like.
When a new owner is searching for a property management company, we are in that interview process. We typically review and research and learn about the property that they're needing help with. We oftentimes will do an on-site walkthrough, typically with the owner, or if they're out of town or something, with their permission, we would walk the property. Then from there, we send a management proposal to them with a management fee. And if they choose to go with us, then there's an onboarding process as well. So we have a very detailed and streamlined process there with a kind of like a to-do list. We oftentimes work directly with the property management company who's already working on the property to ensure a seamless transition. The forms that they need to fill out essentially help us get to know the property, what the maintenance schedule is, who the current vendors are, who the trash company is, what the annuals are, just everything to do with the property. We then establish a maintenance schedule with the property owner and take off running from there.
Input all of the leases and tenant information into our system so that that's all streamlined, and do introduction letters to the new tenants so that they obviously know who their new management company is. And we have, like Lea mentioned, a streamlined process. We have a property packet that we send, so we're gathering the same information from all of the owners, and we can get everything that we need, a checklist for the owners or the previous management company. So we have everything in one spot.
Okay, and then when you're communicating with an owner, what's your process there? Let's talk about monthly. How do you communicate invoices and management, profit, and things like that?
Yeah, so we use a system called AppFolio, a very streamlined system. Reporting, monthly reporting, annual reporting is sent through the owner portal of AppFolio. When they are onboarded, they receive an email to set up a login, and that's where everything lives. You can take a look at your transactions through there. You can take a look at your monthly reports. You are notified when the time comes for 1099s, they are uploaded. So essentially everything is, as far as reporting goes, through the AppFolio on owner portal. As far as other communication goes, it's primarily through email and phone calls, mostly email, I would say.
Yeah.
Unless it's an emergency or an urgent matter that we need to discuss with the owners, and we call them. That may entail, like I said, a flood, fire, things like that we need to their direction on, or if we need to get their insurance company involved or something along those lines.
We do have a handful of owners that prefer to communicate via phone call, so they'll get their packet from AppFolio every month, and then they'll set up a phone conversation with Lea or I to kind of go over expenses and rents or any questions that they have, so that we can kind of tailor that a little bit and give them more information if they have questions on their owner packets that they receive.
When an owner is hiring you, what do you see for their expectations versus what actually happens?
So typically their expectation matches what we deliver for the most part. There's, one example I could think of that may not have aligned as far as their expectations versus services we provide, that has happened in the past, which is specifically project management. We are very heavily involved in owners, if they want to upgrade a property or renovate a unit or something along those lines. Very, very involved in that. We know a lot of vendors in town, a lot of contractors, painters, you name it. So typically we are very involved with that. When it comes to large scale, major project management situations, that's something that is typically above our services. For example, renovating an entire complex would be something that we would need the owners to step in on design, essentially making sure vendors are lined up if there isn't a construction company that's managing it. There may be a bit of a line there, but we are generally very involved if it's just a couple units here, a couple units there sort of renovation.
We'll help get all that scheduled with the current tenants and everything like that, post notices, line up vendors, all of that stuff. But there are some times where the design aspect is a little bit above what we do.
We'll certainly give our opinion, but I would definitely want the owner to be very much the final decision maker on that. So.
Is that difficult when you have an owner who's out of area, especially for like a student housing project?
It may be, but email has come a long way, FaceTime, things like that. It oftentimes, doesn't become too much of an issue.
What's one thing that you wished an owner knew prior to hiring you?
Prior to hiring a property management company, we found sometimes that owners have outdated leases. They may not know, state level, city level laws, which could get them in trouble, which may be why they're hiring a property manager in the first place. But sometimes that can be difficult when it comes to the transition to a property management company, because you find out where the gaps are or where they're lacking or what the issues are that need to be resolved. Another issue that we've come across in the past is, oftentimes private owners or even management companies will accidentally create a waiver, meaning they're not consistent with their lease agreement. So, an example could be that they have allowed their tenants to be late in rent or pay on the 12th of each month for the last 9 months and have not ever given them a warning, a violation notice, anything of the sort. And then finally they get sick of it and hire a management company. They, potentially maybe they had a disagreement with those tenants and they're asking for a management company to essentially resolve the issue. But if you've accidentally created a waiver, that could potentially pose an issue or a problem. So that's one thing we've come across in the past.
I would say not having up-to-date leases or correct tenant documentations, applications, move-in condition reports, tenant contact information, that makes the transfer process really difficult if you don't have that information. For us to go gather all that information, getting a hold of somebody where we're just knocking on their door, asking for their name, phone number, date of birth, sometimes isn't the easiest way. We've obviously had to go that route, but that would be my biggest setback with some of our transfers, is just not having the correct documentation.
And to piggyback on that, it is extremely important when they vacate the property to have accurate documentation of what the property looked like before they moved in, any notes the previous owner may have, anything that was pre-existing, things along those lines. Otherwise, we're flying blind at that point. So that's very important during a transition.
So if an owner has old forms, an old rental agreement, do you guys update the into new rental agreements?
We definitely try to get people on our agreements, especially if it's a very old agreement and the information is just really outdated. We'll definitely try to get people on our agreements. Those agreements are grandfathered in, so it's not the end of the world if it doesn't come into play, but we definitely try to get everybody on our agreements so that the rules are more consistent and, we know what's in the lease agreement that way.
How do you guys handle a decision when an owner wants to make a decision that is, you just disagree with it, whether it's setting rents too high or something like that? How do you guys deal with that?
Ultimately, we work for the owner, but we do want to represent the tenants as well. So we always give our feedback. If it's specifically related to rents, we'll give market research. We'll show them comps to let them know, like, hey, look, this property is very similar to yours and they're renting it for $150 less per month. I would suggest that, this is the rent that we aim for. So we definitely try to give our feedback with our experience. We'll give examples, the market research. Ultimately, it's the owner's decision if they want to kind of go against us. And as long as it's according to Oregon landlord law, we'll definitely continue with what the owner wants to do. But most of the time, it's just giving our feedback and our suggestions.
And we'll oftentimes expand on, like she said, our past experiences and expand on how important renewals are, because sometimes owners just want to go ahead and go out the gate with an increase for every year, every pre-lease season, and that may not always be the best option or best choice for that property. Renewals are extremely important. Not only do you get long-term tenants, but you avoid the rent gap for the 10 to 14 day turnover period, and not to mention the turnover maintenance and expenses that they have to incur during that time.
What should an owner look for when they're interviewing a property management company? Is there red flags that an owner should pay attention to?
Yes, read the management agreement. I cannot express that enough. There are, we see it with tenants as well, where they just don't read the lease agreement. It is the same with someone hiring a property management company. We found that they knew nothing of the other fees, essentially any component of the property management agreement. So it's very important to read that. The other fees I'm referring to are, essentially renewal fees, lease-up fees, even maintenance admin fees for coordinating your maintenance. Someone can give you a management proposal with a management fee listed on it, but that may not be exactly what you're paying. So read the management agreement. It is very important. Every management company operates differently. Some have their own on-staff maintenance, and what they essentially do is they coordinate maintenance, and some of them charge administration fee on top of that, and some of them hire out vendors, third-party vendors. And so just read what your management agreement says and make sure you understand everything in that management agreement.
That's what I see most, is when owners are switching management companies, they share that they weren't aware that they call them hidden fees. Obviously they're not hidden, they're in the agreement that they signed, but a lot of times they'll complain to us about, mainly the ones that I see most are the maintenance admin fees for sending maintenance, and then the renewal and lease up fees they're being charged extra to lease units on top of what their monthly management fee is.
I did want to add one other thing to look out for when interviewing a property management company. Depending on the type of property you have, student housing, HUD loan property, make sure you tell the property manager that you're interviewing everything about your property, because they may not manage, because HUD loan properties have other requirements, annual audits, the 39-page reports. There's a lot that comes with that. There's also a lot that comes with student housing because of the seasons. You have to be very specific with when you start pre-leasing, when you start renewals, and if you have a student housing property, you want to make sure that whoever you hire is being proactive with that, not reactive. Some owners in the past have expressed that the previous management company that they were coming from did not lease the units until the current tenant has vacated because it shows better. Well, that may not work in a student housing situation. And honestly, you're lucky if that works for you, because pre-leasing is the way to go for student housing. You should have previous photos of it being empty or virtual tour, and also offer in-person tours. You don't want to hold out till the summer because then you'll miss the boat.
Especially for larger units, you want to get those pre-leased early as you can.
So Krystina, walk us through the application process for a tenant, really start from finish. How does it work?
So we, like Lea mentioned, we use AppFolio, so everything's syndicated through our website. So applicants would apply directly from our website. It comes to our back end where it's date and time stamped. We process applications in the orders in which they're received. And then we do a full criminal credit background check on all of our applicants and rental history. That's all done through AppFolio. So it's really streamlined and it's really quick. As long as their screening isn't too intensive, we get an approval back within minutes through AppFolio with all their crime, credit, rental history. It's very, very quick. From there, we send approvals, and that's through AppFolio as well. We send a document for them to secure the property, pay the deposit, and sign the lease. And most of the time, that's all done within 48 hours of an application being received. Sometimes it is a little bit delayed if they want to physically walk the property before they sign. We do encourage people to use our virtual tours so that we're not interrupting the current tenant's day-to-day life, but we do in-person tours as well. So sometimes there is a little bit of a delay in signing so that we can post notice to get them into the unit. But typically it's all pretty quick, especially for campus pre-lease. Some properties are reserved within the same day that we're getting an application. They go really fast.
And do you want to add anything to that? Just about, you probably haven't had to do a lot of
To be honest, I haven't. It's mostly Krystina.
You do the commercial side though, so.
I do,
Yeah,
but
talk
it's
about that,
essentially
please.
it's the same process. We review everything: criminal, credit, income, and rental history, things along those lines, and make a determination from there. It is also very quick on the commercial side. We get an approval same day typically, and they may not be moving in for 3-4 months, but we can get them signed up and locked in pretty quick.
Time is money for people who are looking for units, especially for commercial. They need to often secure a site so they can figure out where they're going to move their operations.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot that is involved with that when moving your business. So I know that very well. So yes, absolutely.
I'm just curious because I know the industry has changed a lot too. Do most of your tenants, especially like the students, does everybody just do everything on their phone for applying and everything's just
Yeah,
done on the
everything
phone?
is really quick through their phone. Our application is very user-friendly, either from a desktop or from their phone. We very rarely have somebody come in and want to do an in-person paper application. We do have that option available, but I think that's happened once in the last 2 years that I can remember, where somebody came in and just needed to do a paper application, but it's all done really quick through their phone. We do approvals via text and email, so they get those really quickly as well. So it's a really quick process. Like you said, time is money. For commercial, it's the same for residential. There's a lot of properties out there for people to pick from, so we want to get them secured before they get distracted somewhere else.
When you're talking about the student housing realm as well, that generation grew up in where computers, internet, everything is very high speed. So the quicker you can get them an answer, the quicker you can lock them in, the better off you are, the better chances you have at pre-leasing that property. You have to essentially act quickly before they move on to something else.
Yeah. And that brings up one other question too. If you have an older campus property like built in the 70s, I know most landlords have tenants sign up for their own Wi-Fi, but I know there's some properties where they still offer it. How much of an impact does that make? Do tenants especially students, have a tendency to gravitate to a property for specific amenities? I'm sure you see all the tiers where they're going for the top tier, they want the granite and the top of the line, but for somebody that's looking to go into maybe they're budget conscious, do you see them gravitate to a property if the landlords offer Wi-Fi?
I wouldn't specifically say just Wi-Fi, but the students that are more budget friendly or looking for more of a budget unit, they do take into consideration what's included, whether that be Wi-Fi, trash, water, sewer, what amenities are included with their rent. Wi-Fi used to be like a really popular one. I'd say like 5 years ago, 10 years ago. The last few years, I don't see it very popular for people even wanting that, or properties that it's included. We see a lot of students are getting their own just because it's not, the basic free Wi-Fi doesn't get all their streaming needs. So they typically go and get their own Wi-Fi even if it's included.
How do you guys handle maintenance requests? What's your system and how do you get them handled? I know you probably deal with immediate repair requests versus scheduled. So walk me through that.
Yeah, it's two separate realms really for maintenance. We have our day-to-day maintenance work orders that come in from tenants. Those are primarily received via AppFolio or tenants calling in and reporting an issue to us. And we kind of address those whether they're an emergency and they need taken care of right away, or if it's a light bulb that can be scheduled, a few days out. So that's all emergency versus non-emergency. And then we also have scheduled maintenance to not have deferred maintenance on property. So we call it our maintenance guide or our maintenance Bible. And it's just a calendar task list of when gutters need cleaned, when sprinklers need turned on, just bigger things like that are annual services or biannual services so that we can stay on top of those and not have any deferred maintenance.
When something goes wrong at 2 a.m, i.e. somebody getting locked in an elevator, how do you guys deal with that?
Lots of coffee the next day. Lea and I take turns being on call. We have a couple other people that take turns being on call. That was just this year that we've rotated in. But we do month on, month off, and we just take those calls. Most of the time, they're usually not emergencies. It's a lot of parking or
Someone's parked in my spot.
Yeah, somebody's parked in my spot, and people think that's an emergency. But the ones that are emergencies that we've responded to, floods, fires, elevator entrapments, all of the above, it's Lea or I responding to the properties.
Walk me through a real live example that you've had that you'll never forget, like a 2 a.m. call that sticks in the back of your mind.
Oh, well, there was a dumpster fire. Somebody had flicked a cigarette butt in the dumpster that was next to the building, and the building caught on fire. And I think it was about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I responded immediately, and tenants were all safe. Everybody was safe. Fire department, kicked some doors in and got everybody out. So from there, the fire was out as well. They put it out fairly quickly. It was one corner of the building. But from there, it's a lot of, coordinating, contacting the property owners, contacting the insurance company, communicating with all of the tenants because a couple of them were displaced at the time and we needed to make sure everything was safe, everything was repaired. So there's definitely a lot of communication, a lot of coordinating. Yeah, the Red Cross was involved in that, and they also have programs to assist with, temporary housing and things like that. So
How do you guys handle rent collection and if a tenant happens to be late? How do you handle that?
Most of our tenants pay through AppFolio. We do still receive in-person checks or they'll mail us checks, but most of our rent collection is through AppFolio, so that's pretty streamlined. We do the standard, you pay rent by the 5th, anything after the 5th is late. We really strive to communicate with our tenants, and if our tenants are communicating with us, that's something that we like to work with. If they let us know that they're going to be late next month for rent, we'll put a note on the account. Obviously, we still follow the procedures with giving notices and things like that, but we just want tenants to communicate with us. What gets nervous with us with rent is when you've had a tenant who's always on time and then, the next month we don't hear from them and their rent is late. That's kind of when it becomes a red flag to us because that's not a typical situation. But we just go through our normal process with collecting rents and, sending notices and doing inspections to make sure people haven't abandoned and that sort of thing.
Yeah, we have essentially a step-by-step process with that. So after the 8th is when we send 10-day notices out, which essentially starts the beginning stages of a non-payment of rent eviction. If, there's a deadline on that notice, and if they don't pay, then essentially they'll be evicted for non-payment of rent. But like Christina said, we over communicate with our tenants. We communicate via email, phone, text, multiple times. If we still don't hear anything, we post notices to enter. We call them abandoned unit notice. And we get a lot of responses from that. They know we're coming, we're entering their units, so they'll respond and say, hey, I'm still here. I'm sorry I haven't communicated or responded to you, but I am here. I'll have rent paid by the end of the day today, something along those lines. Usually those abandoned unit inspections resolve, 80%? Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Krystina, how do you build a good relationship with a tenant but still maintain professional boundaries?
Yeah, I think that's something you kind of just learn in time, but just being fair. Ultimately, these are their homes, and sometimes emotions do get high if it's like a maintenance request that they think they need resolved right away, and it's something that we can't schedule for a couple days, but it's just listening to them. Most of the time, people just want to be heard, so we just listen to them, let them communicate their frustrations or their feelings, and then we try to just resolve it as quickly as we can, as professionally as we can, and take the emotion out of it. Sometimes you'll get a tenant that's pretty heated and it may feel like that it's targeted directly at you, but it's not. It's just a situation. So you just have to take the emotion out of it, be a little empathetic towards them, and just hear them out. At the end of the day, people just want to be heard, so just let them vent their frustrations and then give them the best resolution that we can give them.
What do you think that tenants appreciate most about how AG operates?
I would say our communication. We actually get told that quite often, whether we're just updating somebody that, hey, I don't have an answer for you right yet, but give me a few hours and I'll get back to you with an answer. Just communication in general is what we get a lot of feedback from our tenants that they really respect from us, is we keep them in the loop as much as we can and just keep them involved and respond to them and get back to them with their questions as quickly as possible.
One other point of feedback we received from tenants in the past, specifically from property transition where they've had a management company prior to us, is that we have dispute processes or review process discussions, things like that, whereas some companies essentially just have hey, this is what you owe at the end of your tenancy, and there's no room for, hey, that was already there when I moved in or anything along those lines, and they're typically sent to collections within 10 days. We do have a dispute process as well that it's reviewed personally by Krystina or I, so we've found that has been welcomed.
When a tenant and an owner want opposite things to happen, how do you guys handle that?
Well, we share our experiences with the property owner and attempt to have a solid discussion between the two. So one semi-unique thing in property management is that you have two clients that you're trying to please. So that is something you have to navigate through, and you have to make sure both parties are happy. Sometimes you may not be able to make them both happy, but ultimately we revert to what is fair and what is allowable in Oregon landlord-tenant law. And if that means telling the owner, no, we cannot do that, then it is telling the owner that, we can't do that. But we do try to have very, very detailed discussions with both parties to try to get them on the same page. Because like I said, ultimately, you have two clients you're trying to please.
We're just stuck in the middle sometimes.
What is the move in and move out and the turnover process for your company? What does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, so primarily with campus, that's when that's really important because you don't want to miss the boat renting something. So we begin pre-leasing really early so that we know when tenants are going to vacate, and we have a turnover period. We know how long it takes us to typically turn over a 2-bedroom unit, a 3-bedroom unit. So we pre-schedule a lot of that. We have like our carpet cleaning all pre-scheduled. We reach out to a group of vendors that we use throughout the summer for repairs, cleaning and painting, and we let them know, hey, we have X amount of turns coming this summer. Most of that is just pre-scheduling as much as you can so that you're not caught off guard. We also do pre-move out inspections. That helps a lot because then you're not really surprised during the summer if there's something where you walk into and you're like, oh man, what happened? You've kind of had eyes on it before, so you can pre-schedule that. We also do a really detailed pre-move-in inspection where we take a virtual tour of the unit, we take a lot of pictures of the units, and it's sent to the new tenant so that when they vacate, we know exactly what the property looked like when they moved in, and we can revert to that if we have any questions for deposits or charges when they move out.
I also want to emphasize we over communicate. We mentioned this about tenants and owners, but we also over communicate with our vendors. We were probably one of the few that pre-schedule up to 9 months, well, maybe not 9 months, 7 to 8 months in advance sometimes for carpet cleaning. Anything that you know needs to be scheduled, you just go ahead and get it on the schedule. It does not hurt to have it scheduled that far in advance.
You can always cancel it if it's not needed, and that's what a lot of vendors appreciate is they'd rather have something taken off their plate that time of year than trying to sneak something in because it's already a really busy season.
Yes, so part of communicating with those vendors is essentially letting them know how many turnovers we're going to have for the summer so they can plan for it. We even list and highlight the heavy dates, which is typically around my birthday in August, of course. But over communicate that with them so that they may hold a spot for you, or their crew can accommodate your properties. We found that that's been really helpful. We used to have breakfast meetings with those vendors as well to just kind of go over what to expect for the summer. We decided we didn't want to waste their time, so email was, the next best thing for that, and essentially it gives you the same information, how many turnovers we're going to have, what weeks of the summer is going to be the heaviest. They can expect X amount of work orders for that month, et cetera, et cetera. So over communicating with vendors has been really helpful for us. We found that a lot of local vendors too, whether it's cleaners, painters, contractors, carpet cleaning vendors, blinds cleaning, blinds repairs, any of those vendors tend to prioritize our properties because we pre-schedule them so early.
Okay, so help our listeners understand, because you just mentioned something important, that you're kind of the thick of your business is for turnovers is in August. So if school gets out, say mid-June, when do the students actually move out? Is it typically end of June, July 1st, they're turning in keys, and then you go in and make repairs, and then you start the finish process with carpet cleaning? How does that work?
Yeah, so our leases vary. A lot of our leases end mid-June through mid-September. So we have different turnover dates for all of our properties, and we see students moving out throughout the whole summer. We do get quite a few who move out in June, even if their lease goes through August, but we also have students who stay until the very end of their lease, so the end of August, mid-September.
Or we have students who go home for a couple months and then come back and officially move out and then turn in their keys. So we have all of the above.
And our turnover process, I would say, is relatively short compared to some that we've seen. We strive for about a 10-day turnover process from the day the tenant vacates to when the new tenants move in. Some of our bigger units are units that we've done pre-inspections on, and we can tell that they're going to need a little bit more work. We'll add days to those. But for the most part, it's between that 7 to 10 day turnover process for vendors to get in and get all the work done.
We do have some as large as 8 bedrooms with 8 bathrooms. One other point of feedback for any owner that is planning on renovating a property or building a property is to try to get, whether it's finishes, appliances, things like that, that are more readily available.
Customized.
Not as custom, exactly, because in the event we have to repair it, find a repairs parts, or replace it in general, that can oftentimes delay the process, and we can't leave a tenant without a working refrigerator for X amount of time. We have to provide that refrigerator. So,
okay, what separates a good property management company from a great one?
I would say communication. We hear that from tenants and owners the most, is where they have complained about previous management companies is just lack of communication. They sent an email or left a voicemail and they didn't hear back for 3 to 5 days. And we do over communicate. We do like to get back to a tenant or an owner within the same day, if possible, the next day. But I would say that would be what I see the most, is what separates a good from a great property management is just communicating.
We do have an internal policy to get back to any emails, phone calls, anything that comes into our office within the same day. If it comes in at the end of the day, the next morning is when they should reply. reception knows that, our leasing agents know that. That's something we pride ourselves in. And we do hear that other companies may take 3 to 5 days to get back to somebody, which in that scenario, you lose a lead, or they could move on to somebody else for that type of scenario. Also, balancing relationships with owners and tenants is another important piece of detail there. Like I said, we have 2 clients we're trying to appease, and we're trying to work through issues or problems. Ultimately, we revert to what's fair and what's allowable within Oregon landlord-tenant law. But the communication and balancing that relationship between the owners and the tenants, because essentially you as a property manager, you're the middleman attempting to
Make both parties happy.
Exactly. Yeah.
For an Oregon apartment owner who is self-managing, what's the first sign that it's time to hand over the reins to a property manager?
Oh, where do we start? If you start accidentally creating waivers, which I don't know if you're doing at the time, and you start to get pushback from that tenant and they start to essentially quote landlord-tenant law to you, you may want to either contact an attorney or contact a property management company. If I were an owner, not a property manager, if I owned more than 4 units, I would probably want to hire a property management company. That's just a lot to handle as far as general questions, maintenance, repairs, complaints, evictions, the account collecting rents. It just becomes a lot. So my suggestion would be if you have more than 4 rentals.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think if you're a landlord and you're developing like personal relationships with your tenants, that's kind of where it would get a little bit tricky. And I would suggest just having a property manager so you can defer to that, because it would be hard as an owner if you knew your tenant for, 5 or 10 years and you saw that they were going through a hardship and you wanted to be able to make an exception on rent payments or something being late. But as an owner, you need your rent. So if you had a property manager, you could always just defer to your property manager and take that personal relationship out of it.
So full disclosure for our listeners, Krystina and Lea and AG Property Management manages my residential properties as well as my commercial, as well as for my family. And my mother in particular had self-managed her properties for about the last 35 years. And she sold a large portion of her duplex portfolio about 6 years ago because she had self-managed, and what she didn't sell, we got her to turn over to Lea and Krystina. And she said to me, I wish I would have known how easy this was. I would have kept my whole portfolio and just turned it over to them. So I really endorse you guys. You guys are amazing at what you do. I can't recommend them enough. Every owner that I've referred to AG Property Management raves about them and the process, and I highly recommend them. So thanks for being here today and watching. I'm René Nelson with PacWest Commercial Real Estate, and why don't each of you say who you are again and how people could reach you, LinkedIn or your company website?
I'm Lea. I'm with AG Property Management and AG Campus Housing, and our phone number, 541-505-9906. Or you can reach out to us directly via email, and I'll just give you the office email because we also get those. It's info, I-N-F-O, @agcampushousing.com.
I'm Krystina with AG Property Management, AG Campus Housing, and same contact information as Lea, or you can just find us on our website and put in an inquiry through there, and it's agcampushousing.com.
Thanks for watching.